And I think there was one particular point, which is about the monitoring. If you use external devices to monitor, which obviously has a great deal of information to teach us about what is going on, but does that get in the way of our intuitive ability to notice what is happening, our own self-awareness in a sense?
Yes, so when you are constantly monitoring your system, there may be a possibility that your original senses can atrophy.
Let me talk a bit more about that muscle strength and muscle mass, because there is, I mean, as you age, you need your muscles, and there's quite a lot of focus in health and nutrition about building muscle mass.
Right.
But I understand that a Japanese perspective might have some different elements to add to that.
Right. So in the Japanese traditional practices, or what I call Japanese natural health, where Japanese martial art and healing arts are based on, and people like, karate people, aikido people, they often say, Ikigai Bio-Hacking, where Japanese wisdom meets modern science. Interview by a British Shizenha. That's what I'll be sharing with you today, so stick around. Hi, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, a 63-year-old biohacker based on Japanese natural health and the author of Ikigai Bio-Hacking. Today, it is a special episode because I'll be interviewed by a friend of mine called Marco Cornell, who is visiting me from Devon, UK. And he is a process-oriented psychologist, and he's involved with the regenerative agricultural farm called Apricot Centre in Devon. So in many ways, he is leading natural kind of holistic lifestyle himself. So he is a British Shizenha. So it's like a Japanese Shizenha meeting a British Shizenha, and he can give you kind of a different perspective from usual because he's also a Shizenha. Then he can ask specific questions related to the kind of holistic lifestyle and so on. In fact, we met each other in Brighton in our early 20s. So he's the same generation. He's in his early 60s, and he's very much interested in health. And in fact, we've been doing a lot of health activities together in the last few days here in my hometown. So we did IWT, this Japanese walking technique, and we did a body weight hit, and we've been eating a lot of natto, fermented brown rice, and other, Japanese healthy dishes. So it is going to be a long interview, but we are going to deal with a lot of topics in depth. So I'm sure you'll enjoy the video very much. Please watch the video until the end. Thank you.
It's a great joy that I'm sitting here in Hino, a rural town in the Shiga prefecture in Japan, and visiting my friend who I call Yoshi, but he's known more widely as by you readers out there as Hachiaki Takamiya. So Yoshi and I have actually known each other for over 40 years. I think it's about 41. We first met in our 20s in Brighton in the UK. And Yoshi was living there for about 4 years, and I was at university. And those were really creative times when we had a small circle of friends who were experimenting with alternative ways of living, exploring health, community, and creativity. And we were all threading together and exploring things as part of the same tapestry. Since that time, our paths have branched and interwoven in different and surprising ways. I became a process-oriented psychologist and studying with Dr. Arnold Mindell. And together with my wife, Marina, we founded the Apricot Centre, which is an organic farm with producing fruits and vegetables for the local community, an education centre for training regenerative farmers and land workers. And also, it's a well-being service for children and families. We focused a lot around adoption, but in particular, we're interested in working with nature, the connection with nature in young people. And so now being here in this land, in Japan, and within this culture, that's a profound honor for me. And it's really the first time I've managed to come to Japan. So what excites me about Yoshi's work is how he brings together the Japanese traditional knowledge, including his connections with the Shizenha people, who remind us of our inseparability from nature, the interconnection with nature, of humans and nature, and how he combines that with more contemporary Western practices like biohacking, which we'll talk more about. And that weaving feels both timely and timeless. So in our conversation today, we'll trace both our shared roots in Brighton and the deeper roots that stretch back through multi-generational and ancient understandings, knowledge and practices of longevity that have been tended for centuries. So we'll ask, how does the Japanese and Western approaches to health, how they might complement one another, how biohacking can meet traditional knowledge without erasing it, and how practices around food, fasting, movement and body exercise, and fermentation can nourish not just long lives, but lives lived with depth and vitality. So we'll explore subtler daily practices in more detail, like sequencing of meals, which have become really interesting to hear about, muscle releasing as opposed to muscle flexing, and tending to the gut microbiome, which is very timely and topical these days. So all of these link everyday rhythms to longevity. So first of all, I just to ask you, Yoshi, when you look back at those times, those early years, what do you think first drew you towards exploring health, nutrition, and longevity, not just as ideas, but as a way of living?
Right. So back in the time in the UK, we are both in our early 20s. And then at that time, we were involved in a kind of holistic movement, and health was definitely part of that movement. But my main interest wasn't necessarily about physical health. It was more kind of a happiness and how to be happy and how to create a happy society. But in a kind of holistic context. So definitely health was part of it. And I did also study shiatsu in the UK, which is kind of strange. Yeah, but anyway, in my shiatsu school, which was actually called the British School of Shiatsu, we studied the macrobiotic diet as well, because it was a kind of macrobiotic school of shiatsu. So I was introduced to this kind of health, the holistic health, in the UK. But then I've moved back to Japan, and I've had a different phases. And then recently, somewhere around 2015 or 2016, I was reaching over 50. I was somewhere around like 55 and so on. And I was thinking of the second career, or because I felt I was becoming old. So I wanted to complete my life with a kind of special mission or something I feel that I'm really supposed to do. Therefore, I wanted to use all the skills that I acquired in this lifetime to maybe contribute to the world. And then I felt health was a good entry point for many people. So my main interest is happiness, like how to be happy, how to create personal happiness and social happiness. But health was good entry point. And because especially, well, that was actually before the pandemic. But even then, when we get older, after middle age, health becomes a very concern for most people. So most people are interested in health. Well, happiness is something vague, something so abstract that it's kind of difficult to understand. But health and happiness are very connected. If you start talking about health, you have to talk about happiness, and vice versa, basically. So I thought this was a great way to not introduce, but maybe, I don't know, explore happiness together with an audience, using the Japanese knowledge or Japanese wisdom or Japanese tradition. So that's how I kind of became interested in the idea of spreading health and longevity through my books and YouTube.
Yes. And I think you've done a great job. I mean, as such a good English speaker, because you've spoken English
Oh,
well
thank
for
you.
many years.
Thank you.
And in a way, you're bringing this to a wider international audience. And so it's fabulous that you're able to do that work.
Thank you.
So longevity, that's a kind of a sort of focus, but why longevity rather than the quality of life?
Oh, yeah. So I say longevity, but I mean, different people have different interpretation of what longevity is. But when I say longevity, I mean increasing your health span. So staying healthy into old age, or basically maybe living up to 100 or 120 years, but in good shape, to be mobile, to be active, and not getting sick or injury and so on. So not necessarily extending my lifespan, which is also talked about in the biohacking movement. So I'm not interested in living to 130 or 140, maybe up to 120, but I don't even mind dying at age 100. So the quality of life matters, and staying healthy is the main aim of the Ikigai Biohacking.
I love it that you're actually thinking of living to 120 or 100. That's even something for a Western person.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I have a personal reason for that, because as you know, my son is still 14 years old. So he was born when I was 50. So basically that means by the time he becomes 20, I'll be 70. And then by the time he becomes 30, I'll be 80. So that's the sort of age that we started expecting that we might die, because many people die in their 80s and maybe 90s. So I felt I needed to stay around longer for him, because most parents usually don't die until your children are 50 or 60 or 70. So I wanted to be around. That means for me, I need to at least live to 100. And if I could live to 120, means I can be with my son for the next, basically the 70 years of his life. So this is a personal, I don't know, desperate kind of a need or desire that I want to live longer than average and then remain healthy throughout that time.
Right. Good. So, let's think about those days in the wild early days in Brighton when we met in our
Yeah, that was a
20s.
wild time, a very incredible time.
Yeah. What was it about that time, our experimentation with alternate living, that still ripples through your life and your philosophy today?
Right. Okay. So what happened in that time was we are in Brighton, and then many of you and other people that I was with were students of the University of Sussex. I was not a student there, but I was sort of living there, and I got to meet them. And then at that time, Sussex University was very radical, very politically radical. And there was also a peace movement called CND, which is a campaign for nuclear disarmament. So many people expressing their kind of outward expression. While our group, because we kind of started a new movement or small kind of a group within the university to look more inward, kind of integrating the personal change and social change. Because in order for the society to change, we need to change. And our small communities, such as relating to your friends and professors and even your parents, and that like a sort of a micro world has to be harmonious to create a macro, world to be harmonious. So I was involved in kind of a holistic viewpoint and holistic way of thinking. So since then, I have kind of gone through different phases, but now that very essence, that experience of the early 80s was the foundation of who I am today. So in the Ikigai Biohacking, we value the integration and holistic approach. For example, the balance between personal health and planetary health. Ikigai Biohacking is all about planetary health as well as personal health, and then balance between science and spirituality. So how to do with this integration and holistic approach is very much, I discovered that in Brighton at that time.
Okay, so is it? I mean, the so coming back to Japan,
Yeah,
and you said something about you were living. This is like a minority kind of small group of people in Brighton,
right.
and then you came back to Japan. What was it like coming back to Japan after that exploration period?
Oh yeah. So Japan was very different. So 80s, Japan in the 80s were very materialistic. And toward the end of the 80s, we had a bubble economy where everybody was making money and people were off to, like owning, cool cars and, wearing fashionable clothes. Like Armani was, very popular then. And so it was completely almost the opposite of what I experienced in the UK, which is very alternative, eating organic food and living with the land and everything. So, and also because I went back to Tokyo, which is a, urban area. So the lifestyle was very urban. Um, but then I think I went back to Japan when I was like 25 or 26. So I was also slightly tired, kind of bored of the kind of alternative culture. If you sort of do that for such a certain period, like 4 or 5 years, you kind of get bored. So I kind of welcome that materialistic lifestyle myself too. But then that was a great learning for me because I could see another aspect. So today, I also want to create a balance between the mainstream culture and the alternative culture. So the Ikigai biohacking is not extreme. It's more, I'm making sure it's doable for anyone to practice. Because when you practice any kind of diet or, certain health sort of method, sometimes you tend to become extreme and you sort of seclude your group from the rest of the society. Like, your group is special and healthy and all those, doing good, but others are creating a problem kind of thing. I didn't want to create that division. So that's something I learned through that experience.
And do you think, like with the Japanese people, the older generations and then the new emerging generations, do you think there's a difference in how people are approaching these? Because there's the traditional ways, which are also nature oriented, and then there's the young people coming into these things.
Right.
What do you notice there?
Okay, so generally speaking, as a society in Japan, and that is probably the same as any other countries. So older generation tend to be more conservative, and younger people tend to be more flexible. Not necessarily with their political views and stuff like that, but generally, so cultural perspective, younger people tend to be more open to new ideas and more flexible. And then, so there's a group of people called Shizenha in Japan who are mostly young people, not only the young people though, but mostly young people who are interested in moving to the countryside and living in a house like a kominka, which is like a, this kind of house, a Japanese traditional house, and then, doing some organic, growing vegetable and rice using organic methods and raising children naturally and so on. So they are reconnecting our traditional lifestyle, which is very much based in nature, which we call Shizen. And so Shizenha means naturalist. So Shizenha people are reconnecting to that, the core of our traditional culture in a way that is very flexible. Because older generation, even though they are very traditional and very natural, were very rigid in their mindset and thinking. For example, we could never ask the teacher a question. I mean, some of the old Japanese traditional methods, including the macrobiotic diet, often there was that kind of atmosphere. You couldn't really ask the teacher a question. If teacher says something, then, you just basically follow. While younger people in Japan these days like to ask questions, and therefore they want to check scientific, background of what the teaching is all about and so on. So now that they're basically upgrading the traditional approach by including some scientific research and so on.
So this is a bit of a jump here, but I
Yeah,
just remembered we were talking about this earlier. But so you have like a kind of more fixed mindset that is more about like you don't ask questions
right,
in this culture, and then you have a more flexible emerging culture.
right,
And then in the world larger, we were talking about the kind of whole health movement and how Silicon Valley and sort of how there are certain, it's not like a fixed mindset, but it's sort of like a wish to bring in a trend and bring in a certain way of doing things. And there's a certain amount of control behind that system. And I just wondered if you could briefly speak to that,
right.
because maybe it's a different dynamic, but it has to do with the power of information and where do we find what is true for us, you know?
Right, yeah. So the health and longevity is a very popular subject today, partly because we are baby boomers. I mean, we have I don't know, from our generation to maybe 10 or 20 years, ahead of us. They're all baby boomers. A huge population are entering the senior years. So there's a big market. So if whenever there's a big market, there's always business interest. There's always corporate influence. So although many of the things within health and longevity field are very positive, very useful, it's really changing our potential and possibilities, we always need to be wary of the corporate interest. Certain trends can be pushed because they serve the interest of those corporations. One example would be like a constantly measuring system, which itself may be beneficial medically speaking, but also it opens the market for all those devices for those companies to sell. So, but I don't want to kind of exclude everything, just saying, oh, those are sort of corporate things, and because there are certain goodness within those. So I think keeping the balance is very important. And therefore, this kind of, I don't know, integrating the scientific approaches and traditional approaches, which are based on more naturalistic approach, is very critical, especially now, because of that circumstance.
And I think there was one particular point, which is about the monitoring. If you use external devices to monitor, which obviously has a great deal of information to teach us about what is going on, but does that get in the way of our intuitive ability to notice what is happening, our own self-awareness in a sense?
I think so. I personally think so. Yes. So when you are constantly monitoring your system, there may be a possibility that your original senses can atrophy because we already did those things ourselves and we could feel, we could sense what's happening in our body. I mean, often we talked about, so how do you feel? What does gut feeling tell you, or how your body feels of doing that exercise or eating that food and so on. But once we start using new devices for that, then we will not have to use these sentences that we have been using. And that can make them atrophy. So have you seen a film called Princess Mononoke? It's an animation film by Hayao Miyazaki. So there's a character called Ashitaka, and he sort of feels or he senses a second before something is happening, like, oh, someone is coming or something's going to happen. So we used to have such an ability back in 300, 400 years ago and so on. But we've all lost it now because we stopped using them. So the same thing can happen that if we stop using what we can do now, replacing with other method, then we may not be able to use these senses again. So yeah, we need to be wary of that thing.
I think that's a very interesting area, and maybe for another time to go deeper into that. It's fascinating. So just coming back to the Western and Japanese approaches, what do you see as the possibility of these approaches dancing well together and complementing one another towards healthier and longer lives?
Right. So I think one thing is looking at the pros and cons of both approaches. For example, for scientific approaches, while science is wonderful, there are limitations. Like, for example, because for the nature of experiment, nature of research, you can only look at one or two things at a time. You cannot really check the multiple, nutrient all at the same time. So protein, for example. So when you look at the protein, the people kind of do a lot of research only about the protein amount, the protein quality, which means your amino acid profile within the protein. But then why are you doing it? Protein has so many different, functions, but one of the reasons that people want to increase their protein intake is to build muscles or increase your muscle mass. Um, so basically, muscle protein synthesis is the kind of goal of your protein. Right? I mean, it's just one goal. But to do that, protein isn't the only thing. There are many other nutrients which are important, including fiber. Fiber isn't something talked about so much in the context of protein and muscle building, but fiber is critical for your gut health. And if this protein thing doesn't interfere with fiber, that is fine, but it does. Because if you try to increase your protein intake, which is recommended a lot by many experts these days, you will see a trade-off of fiber deficiency, basically. There are ways to have both high protein and high fiber, but it is usually quite difficult. For example, many high protein advocates say it is better to consume animal-based protein because those proteins have a better amino acid profile. But then animal sources don't include fiber. So unless you have a majority of your protein intake from plant sources, it is difficult to have both high protein and high fiber. But even with a high plant-based protein diet, there is a problem because you might look fiber diversity because you'll be looking for only high protein foods such as beans and nuts and seeds, but not other like leafy vegetables who are low in protein. Then you would not have the balance and diversity, which is so critical for the gut microbiome. So that is one limitation of science when you are measuring only one aspect. But with the traditional Japanese approaches or any ancient approaches or like Eastern approaches, we look at multiple elements all at the same time. Not only the protein, but fiber, the gut health, heart health, muscle health, everything together. Therefore, we don't get into such a pitfall in the traditional approaches. But traditional approaches have cons too, such as this rigid educational structure that you cannot ask the teacher question, and therefore we tend to become very narrow-minded. Science basically opened the doors to have a wide variety of thinking and wide variety of approaches. While the traditional approaches say, oh, this is the way, this is the answer, this is the most natural way of living, therefore you should follow. But I think it's important to explore even the natural approach. So by merging science and traditional approaches, we can find a sweet spot of the two. So I think that is one way of weaving the two together.
Nice. And I think we're going to talk later about sort of physical exercise and health approaches, because I think there are some differences in maybe a more Oriental approach
right
than, say, a more mainstream Western approach to
Right.
body work, let's
Yeah.
say. So we'll come back to that later.
Okay.
If I could just shift us just to talk a little bit about your connection with the Shizenha people
Right.
of Japan. And I wonder if you could share what is Shizen, and what it means to you and how it informs your approach to health and longevity.
Right. So Shizen is a Japanese word which means nature. So everything like the sea, mountains, river, lakes, those are all part of Shizen, forest. And also Shizen has a kind of a planetary aspect, like, the moon, the sun, the movement of the moon, sun, stars. Those are all part of Shizen. And Japanese culture is very much based on Shizen. So especially Japanese natural health practices are very connected to the natural approach, including martial art and healing art, such as shiatsu. So Shizen is so important in Japanese culture. And then we lived according to the natural cycle for a long time. We lived according to the circadian rhythm, monthly rhythm, and annual rhythm. And we we had organic food, and we used natural medicine instead of modern medicine and so on. But that lifestyle is fading away due to modernization. So today in Japan, not many people lead a natural lifestyle. I would say many of them lead even less natural lifestyle compared to the Westerners, because I think there is a much growing movement to go back to nature in the West. So the Shizenha people, which means naturalist, they are bringing back this natural tradition to the society. Yeah. And the Shizen is the core of Ikigai Biohacking. So Ikigai Biohacking has another name that is Shizenha Biohacking. So it's a natural biohacking.
Mm-hmm. I just wonder if we could unpick that a little bit in more detail, just
Right.
because there's some really interesting things about circadian rhythms and how we might work more with the rhythms, tune into the rhythms of the daily rhythms, the annual rhythms, and the moon rhythms.
Right.
And I think you gave some interesting examples to me that I found quite inspiring. So I wonder if you might say a few things.
Right, sure, yeah. So circadian rhythm is becoming popular within biohacking movement in the West too. So many people, for example, do a cold exposure in the morning and then do a heat exposure at night. That can align us with the circadian rhythm. And also have the morning sunlight exposure. That is also good for aligning ourselves with the circadian rhythm too. And generally speaking, just, sleep at night and wake during the day and move during the day, and then, stay passive at night and that whole thing. But I think Saka monthly rhythm and Saka annual rhythm is not talked about enough in the Western biohacking arena, and that is very important in Japanese traditional practices. For the annual rhythm, basically the seasonal rhythm. So we have a concept called Shindo Fuji, which means live locally and live seasonally. So when you consume vegetables, it is better to consume local vegetables and eat seasonal vegetables. So this living according to the season is, living according to the annual rhythm. And for the monthly rhythm, we have the movement of the moon. So we have the new moon and the full moon. And we used to have a lunar calendar, which is based on the movement of the moon, not the sun. But even with the Gregorian calendar, you can always mark the day of the new moon and the full moon on your calendar, and then you can live according to that. You don't need to do, detailed. I mean, there are certain things you can do for those, the moon, the lunar cycle, but I won't talk about the details today. But one thing I do is I conduct a pastoral ritual on the new moon night and the full moon night. So new moon is the beginning for the full moon is a completion, and often it is said that it's good to give wishes in the new moon. So I practice something called yoshuku, which means celebrating your future outcomes or future desired outcome in advance. Yoshuku is a part of Japanese culture. So we have a hanami, which is the cherry blossom viewing in the spring. And then we usually sit under the cherry trees and we have picnic and we drink and we celebrate. But we are doing it to celebrate the autumn harvest in advance, the ripe harvest in autumn. And because cherry blossom kind of resembles the good yield. So by looking at the cherry blossom, we feel, oh, maybe this year we'll have a great harvest, and then we celebrate now in advance. So that is yoshuku. So I practice yoshuku on the new moon. So it's like a visualization, like visualizing your future outcome. But instead of just, meditating or visualizing, I make it a celebration. I drink for this event. And the thing that I do on the full moon night is ima iwai, which means celebrating the present. So the full moon is the time to basically give gratitude of what you have accomplished and what you have manifested. So I feel, grateful for, I feel happy about things that I feel grateful for happening today. So I appreciate that. Then I celebrate for this present reality. Yeah.
So this is all really interesting to me because I also remember us talking about 51 seasons in Japan. There at the Shizen, how people maybe have the concept of 51 seasons,
Right, yeah.
which would be like there's these rhythms in every week, every day.
Right, yeah. So we have 4 seasons, but those are divided into actually 20. There's several different ways, like 24 or maybe 51 too. They're different divisions. And then in the old calendar, they tell us what to do in each day of the month, when this new phase starts and when that ends, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, that's something I'd like to know more about another time, in more depth. Let's move into biohacking and how it can be integrated into Japanese traditional knowledge. And when you use the word biohacking, what do you actually mean by it?
Right. So biohacking is originally kind of started in the Silicon Valley, some system engineers in Silicon Valley. And it means hacking doesn't really mean, like hacking another person's computer system or anything like that. It's more like as a system engineer, you understand the system. So in the same way, you understand your body, how it functions, what kind of nutrient can, change your body, what kind of exercise can change your body and so on. To become an expert, like you also become a personal doctor and having your own understanding so that you can take responsibility of your health. That's what biohacking means. But personally, I don't like to use the term biohacking because it has another connotation these days. It's partly half technological. I mean, biohacking includes so many things, and some of the things are very natural, such as, fasting, diet, exercises, heat exposure, cold exposure, but other more technological interventions such as, implanting microchip into your body for your, monitoring and so on. So I am personally not interested in technological intervention part. I'm interested in more natural approaches within biohacking. So I once thought of using a term bioharmonizing, yet most people won't understand, what that is. So still using biohacking, but I call this approach Shizenha biohacking, like a naturalist biohacking, or Ikigai Bio-Hacking. Because I started the diet called the Ikigai diet. So Ikigai Bio-Hacking basically, goes smoothly with the diet. But it basically means a natural biohacking.
Okay, so let's go into some detail now about. We've had some conversations about what we eat and when, and I'm
Right.
thinking we've also just been talking about the rhythms of the days, the weeks, the months, and the year, but also like the sequence of how and what we eat and how that can be important to gut health, for example, and our metabolism.
Right. So generally speaking, there are certain orders of eating. One goal is to stop the blood sugar spike. Yeah. For example, you don't want to eat carb fats. Maybe you want to eat vegetables or protein dish before eating carb to slow down the elevation of blood sugar. So I usually eat salad or some kind of vegetable dish first, and then protein dish second, and finally the carb dish. This is the general guideline for most meals. But breakfast is a slightly, different story because it is very important. Because it is a fast breaking meal. You have a meal for the first time after a long absence from eating. Therefore, what you eat first makes a huge difference. So this is not just for the blood sugar, but for the gut microbiome too. And also it changes depending on how long that absence of eating was. I usually practice 36 hours fast once a week, but other day I practice 14 hours fast with 3 meals.
The 14 hours would be, say, from
Like
stopping eating at 7,
right,
maybe,
yeah,
and then starting to eat
at
breakfast
9 o'clock.
at 9 o'clock.
Right, so that gives a 14 hours of fasting window. Yeah. But I mean, regardless of that, when I'm still fasting most day anyway. So breakfast, I think of the gut microbiome. This is my first priority. So often people talk about protein. You need protein for breakfast for the same reason, because you have absence of eating, you have a protein deficiency. So you need to provide new protein. And gut bacteria, beneficial bacteria hungry too. You want to feed those beneficial bacteria. Therefore, prebiotics, like a fiber, is important. That's what I say about high protein diet. Sometimes have a trade-off of fiber deficiency, but you need to pay attention to fiber intake too for your gut health. And if you understand how your gut works, you also know that probiotics are important. Probiotics are often, you get from fermented foods such as natto, yogurt, kimchi, and that kind of food. And then,
they're also produced you also have them in your gut already. Is that
right?
right?
So some of the beneficial bacteria already live in your gut, such as bifidobacteria, lactic acid bacteria, they already exist in your gut. But as we get older, especially after 60, the amount of bifidobacteria, for example, start decreasing. So we need probiotics from outside to support the already existing resident bifidobacteria. So that means I think eating yogurt with bifidobacteria is very helpful for your breakfast. But not all yogurts are made with a bifidobacteria, so you need to pick the one that is made with bifidobacteria. And also natto, because natto contains natto bacteria, which have a different function from bifidobacteria. And if you have both of them, you can optimize your gut microbiome tremendously, a lot more than just simply eating only yogurt. Shall I continue? Is that quite long?
Well,
Yeah.
How does that work? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Those of you who just discovered this video today, this is the Ikigai Diet channel, which is about how to increase health span for people over 50 or 60. And I am the author of 4 books, and I usually cover things like diet, exercise, mindset, and anything else that is related to increasing your health span. So if you're over 50 or 60 and interested in health span extension, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. So there is a bacterial relay in your gut. So, in this relay, there are 3 players: the first runner, the second runner, and the third runner. Now, so the first runners are called saccharifying bacteria, and then Natto bacteria is one of the well-known saccharifying bacteria. In fact, we don't know any other bacteria that had the saccharifying function. Then there may be, but it's not known. So that means natto is one of the few foods that we can get saccharifying bacteria from. And then the second runner are like bifidobacteria and lactic acid bacteria you can get from yogurt or kimchi, that kind of food. And then third runners are butyrate-producing bacteria that I call longevity bacteria and propionic acid bacteria. So first, we have prebiotics, which are fiber. So we eat fiber, and then usually you think, so the bifidobacteria and lactic acid bacteria can break down that fiber, which they can, but they're not efficient at doing it. But saccharifying bacteria does. So natto bacteria can break down fiber more efficiently and then change the fiber into sugar, which makes a lot easier for the second runner, like bifidobacteria and lactic acid bacteria, to basically break down. Then, okay, I'll talk about the case of the bifidobacteria. So bifidobacteria produce acetate using the sugar that natto bacteria produce. And then, so bifidobacteria pass this acetate to butyrate-producing bacteria with a third runner. And then the butyrate-producing bacteria produce butyrate using the acetate. So both butyrate and acetate are short-chain fatty acid, and they are critical. They do all the wonderful work. So the goal of your gut health, or what we call chokatsu in Japanese, means gut workout, is to produce short-chain fatty acid. Short-chain fatty acid.
Butyrate is very important in the
for the immune system. Right? Butyrate is very important for the immune system. Therefore, to complete this relay, you need fiber, and then you need natto, and in this case, you need yogurt with bifidobacteria, and then you need butyrate-producing bacteria that you already have in your gut. Mm-hmm. And then you can optimize your gut health. So this is critical if you could do this in the morning.
So I just want to take that one step further, and then we'll move on. But there's also the mechanism of passing the baton, if you're using the same analogy, that how do these things get delivered through the system? Because I think you were saying that the yogurt bacteria can be broken, that they can be destroyed in the stomach. Is that right?
Yeah.
How is it that how does the race happen so that they all get through to the end point of the intestine?
Bifidobacteria can be burnable with the stomach acid. So even though if you consume yogurt, by the time you get to the stomach, quite often many of them are destroyed by the stomach acid, and then so that's not what you want. But by eating natto first, it can prevent it happening. Number one, because natto bacteria can withstand the stomach acid. It forms something called spore, and it kind of protects itself from the extreme conditions such as extreme heat or extreme cold. So by eating natto, the natto bacteria in natto can protect the bifidobacteria from stomach acid, but also eating fiber before eating bifidobacteria yogurt is also critical. That's the same thing. So natto contains fiber because it's soybean. So in many ways, if you eat natto first, then yogurt, that is very optimal way.
Yeah, and the chewing is
And chewing too. Yeah, if you chew yogurt well, then there is something called IgA in saliva can bind with the bifidobacteria, and that can sort of make sort of seal around the bifidobacteria and then go through the stomach acid smoothly. So there are several ways of protecting bifidobacteria, but so chewing well, eating fiber, and especially eating natto is even better.
Yeah, that was nice. You were explaining to me about chewing yogurt, that a muesli with nuts and seeds in it is a nice way of getting those sort of mouth enzymes working because you're chewing the muesli.
Right, yeah, because usually it's kind of difficult to chew your yogurt. But I usually make muesli with yogurt so that when I eat yogurt, I always chew because I'm eating the muesli. I have to chew to break the food down.
Okay, thank you. So, you mentioned a bit about fasting, your own fasting routines, but I wonder if we could talk about the science and the tradition of fasting and meal frequency.
Right.
In your view, what is it about fasting that makes it such a potent practice for health and longevity?
Right. So, the fasting has several functions, but one of the purposes of fasting for many people is to activate autophagy. You know what autophagy is?
No, I don't.
It's a cellular recycling mechanism. So basically, autophagy rejuvenate our cells, which is very important for longevity, very important for slowing down aging. But there are many ways to activate autophagy. Fasting is one of them, but exercise is another way of activating autophagy. So some people say, oh, if you exercise, maybe we don't need to fast. That can be true, but I think mechanism of fasting is slightly different from the mechanism of exercise, because when you fast, you have a complete depletion from food. You basically stop any kind of nutrient coming in, and that has a sort of different impact than from exercise, which sometimes can be partially, not the entire body. I mean, usually for the cardiovascular exercise, it does work on the entire body, but still, I think there's a difference. So just like, diversity in fiber is critical to the diverse gut microbiome, I think diversity in activities are critical because not all activities are the same. So they probably should have a different function. That's why they are different activities. And that's why fasting has been practiced throughout different cultures and throughout different spiritual traditions. And it has a spiritual function as well if you're doing the prolonged fasting. And also fasting can reset your gut. It can cleanse your gut. So if you want to prioritize your gut health, definitely fasting is important. You do want to incorporate some form of fasting in your daily routine.
Okay, so what are the differences between intermittent and time restricted and prolonged fasting?
Right.
And how are they different in the body?
Right. So intermittent fasting is the most popular one is like 16-hour fasting, where you have like 2 meals a day and you have a 16 hours fasting window and 8 hours eating window. And many people practice, for example, 12 to 8. So your eating window is 12 o'clock noon, and then to 8 p.m. And then from 8 p.m., you stop eating anything, not even snacks, no alcohol, nothing, until until 12 noon the next day. So that's a sort of form of intermittent fasting. But some people do longer, like maybe 17 hours or 18 hours, or some people do shorter, like 14 hours and so on. And time-restricted feeding is very similar. In fact,
Fasting with me.
time-restricted feeding, yeah, is pretty much the same as intermittent fasting.
Okay.
So you restrict your feeding window, such
Okay.
as you only eat within 8 hours window or within 6 hours window, within 10 hours window, and so on. But I mean, there is a early time restricted feeding, which is you want to make the eating window earlier in the day. So not from 12 noon to 8 p.m., but maybe 7 a.m. till, I don't know, 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. or something. Because this way you can align better with the circadian rhythm. It is better to eat breakfast. So many people skip breakfast when we practice intermittent fasting because this is very convenient. It is the easiest way to do it. But if you are thinking about the circadian rhythm, maybe it's better to skip dinner. So you have breakfast and lunch and skip dinner, or you bring the eating window early and then just eat breakfast and late lunch. So I think when people talk about time restricted feeding, they're often talking about early time restricted feeding. Yeah. And prolonged fasting is, it's a longer fast, usually over 24 hours. So 24 hours fasting and longer. Now, recently, some experts say to activate autophagy for longevity purposes, you need to practice prolonged fasting, not intermittent fasting. But we are not certain. I mean, different experts say different things about the length of fasting. But generally speaking, it's becoming a kind of a consensus that we need to do a longer fasting. But that doesn't mean short fasts are not effective, because there are different function of autophagy, there are different levels of autophagy activation. If not for longevity, there are certain benefit to the body. I mean, if you practice 16 hours fast, it gives you a tremendous benefit to the body. Right.
Okay. And if you were to, if people were thinking about starting to fast, what would you recommend as a way into it?
Right. Yeah. If you're starting, I would start slowly. I would start from like very easy part. Maybe start from 12 hours fast, which means, let's say you finish eating at 8 p.m. and you have breakfast at 8 a.m. Then you have a 12 hours of fasting period. And then once you get used to doing that, then you can maybe practice 14 hours fast. That is, I am doing. So you maybe finish at 8 p.m. and you have breakfast at 10 a.m. Then you have a 14 hours fasting. And then once you get used to it, then you can maybe extend to 16 hours fast and eventually to 24 hours. So in my case, I started slow. I mean, I actually did start from the 16 hours fast, but then I did 16 hours fasting for about 6 months. Then I started practicing 24 hours fasting just once a week. Then I did that for another year or so. And then I tried 36 hours fasting, like once every quarter. And then, so eventually I get accustomed to practicing longer fast. So I now do a weekly 36 hours fast, but I don't recommend doing that to a new beginners.
Yeah.
You want to gradually increase the length.
Maybe you're almost like informing the body that it's not starving you.
Right. Right.
There must be something about. I think for me, fasting is difficult because it feels a little bit like not having something that I need.
Right.
But it's a bit of a kind of something that you're caught in that, I must keep regularly eating.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. That's great.
No, right.
So let's move on to think about movements, muscle, flexibility, and nutrition.
Right.
Like as we age and we get over 50 or 60, what is it about protein? What feels sufficient to maintain your muscle mass? And can you explain a little bit about that? Your
Sure.
understanding, yeah.
So the protein is a big topic at the moment, and there's so many different ideas on how much protein we need per day, and there are a lot of disagreement among experts too. So some experts say you need zero point 0.8 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight, which used to be or still is RDA, the recommended daily allowance. While other experts started saying that is not sufficient, you need 1.2 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight, or 1.6. Or some experts say you need more, like 2.0 or 2.2 gram of protein per kilogram body weight. By the way, 2.2 is a pound per, no. It's instead of calculating kilogram, it's a calculating with a pound. So it's kind of easy to remember kind of thing. Yeah. But anyway, so it really depends on individual, depending on your age, your physical condition, and your lifestyle, how active you are. It all changes. So generally speaking, older you get, you require higher amount of protein. And if you're more physically active, you require higher amount of protein too. So finally, each person needs to figure out what amount is most appropriate to you. But for me, and I think in my opinion, I did a kind of different kind of calculation, and for me, 1.2 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight is the most optimal, and it's in the sweet spot. So I talked about this fiber and protein. So to have both sufficient fiber and sufficient protein, this amount works the best for me. So if you have like 1.6 gram, which is often recommended, it's kind of difficult to meet that requirement only with the plant-based protein sources. You need to include some animal-based protein sources, or in some cases, you need to maybe have half of your sources from animal. And that means you are losing your fiber intake. And let's say if you want to gain all your 1.6 gram protein from plant-based, that means you lose a diversity. You tend to take natto, soybeans, tempeh, chickpeas, and all those sort of high protein ingredients, but not low protein ingredients, which are also beneficial for other nutrients. Yeah. So I think diversity of ingredients is very important to keep the diversity and to keep the sufficient fiber. You don't want to raise your protein target too high. So it really juggling really, like, thinking what you prioritize. You prioritize muscle health or heart health or autophagy, because again, high protein can inhibit autophagy too. So to activate autophagy, generally speaking, it is better to lower your protein intake too. But then, therefore, you need to look at with how you exercise too. Because many people say, okay, you can get high protein that you can build muscle. No, you cannot if you don't exercise. Exercise is the number one cause of muscle building. I mean, in fact, 90% of muscle building come from exercise, come from strength training. So if you don't exercise, getting high protein doesn't really help you that much, not greatly. So in other words, if you get just 1.2 gram protein, which for some people is very low, but if you are exercising sufficiently, you should be able to have a sufficient muscle strength and muscle mass.
So can we talk a bit more about that muscle strength and muscle mass? Because there is, I mean, as you age, you need your muscles to maintain your ability to get around. And there's quite a lot of focus in health and nutrition about building muscle mass in the kind of mainstream. But I understand that a Japanese perspective might have some different elements to add to that.
So in the Japanese traditional practices, or what I call Japanese natural health, where Japanese martial art and healing arts are based on, and people like, karate people, aikido people, or practitioner of like a seitai. Seitai is some kind of a body work. It's popular in Japan. They often say, don't go to the gym to do the workout, to build muscles too much, because too much muscle can inhibit your flexibility and mobility. You need a balanced approach. You need to work on flexibility, mobility, and muscle growth all at the same time. So they often recommend body weight strength training. It's not like they don't say you cannot do, machine training or weight training, but they do recommend body weight training more, simply because you're not tensing up your muscles too much and you're giving some room for flexibility and mobility. It depends. It's all depending on individuals, but like Ichiro is a good example. Ichiro is a baseball player who were very, did very well in Major League. And one thing he said was he stopped doing the strength training because that slows down his movement. So he was very supple. Because he was very supple, he was fast. He could run very fast. But when he actually went to Major League, started doing all those strength training like other Major Leaguers did, and then his power improved, but his speed decreased. So in order to regain his original like a talent or ability, he stopped doing the strength training and included more mobility, flexibility type of exercises. So the balance is very important. So this is the problem of, again, the scientific approach is you're only looking at the protein, you're only looking at the muscles. But our body, and not only muscle, we have muscles, the joints and bones and everything, and they all need to move in coordination. And your weight matters too, because if you build too much muscle, you gain weight. And if you get heavier, that becomes a bigger strain on your body. So when you walk up the stairs, it becomes more difficult if you are heavier. So you want to be light, yet muscular. So like, Bruce Lee, for example, he is not a huge, bodybuilder type, very lean body, but he was very fast and he was able to get a wonderful balance, by the way. So that's the essence of martial art in general. I mean, not only Japanese, but Chinese martial art and so on. So if your goal is to staying healthy into old age, meaning preventing fall, and not athletic goals, because if you have an athletic goal of building muscle, it's a whole different story. But for people over 60, and if you are building muscle because you are told to do for preventing falls, you don't need huge muscles. You need sufficient muscle, but you also need balance, flexibility, mobility. And the most important thing is your body is in harmony. All things are in harmony, not unbalanced. That can prevent you from falling. So when you look at the exercises, you need to think of it holistically.
Okay, so let's just, there's two things we've done together since I've been with you in Japan to do with this exercise. And one has been integral walking training.
Interval walking training.
Yes, IWT. So that's one good example of something that people could could work with, and I think that's been studied in Japanese universities
Right.
as a very good way for supporting the body. But it's not just intensive body mass building, is it?
Right.
So and then the other thing we did was a bit of more high intensity training, but I noticed there was also rest periods and activities where we were running down hills and kind of
Right.
jogging down a hill a little bit and letting our bodies, the roughness of the landscape,
Right.
deal with sort of flexibility and balance and
Right.
such like.
Right.
So I wonder if you could just give a bit of an insight into those two
Okay,
areas.
so IWT, which is also called Japanese walking technique recently, and I have been making lots of videos on IWT, so you probably all know about it. So it is a Japanese walking method developed at Shinshu University. And then what you do is you do 3 minutes of slow walking, and then you do a 3 minutes of fast walking, and you basically alternate it for 5 times. So you do 5 sets of low intensity interval training. The intensity is pretty low because when you do the slow walking, about 40% of your maximum heart rate, which is about zone 1 or less than zone 1. And then when you do the fast walking, it is about 70% of your maximum heart rate, which is the end of the zone 2. So which is a lower intensity compared to HIIT, high intensity interval training. So as a cardiovascular exercise, both are good. Low intensity interval training and high intensity interval training are both good. But I kind of recommend IWT for people over 60 because it is much easier and it is not so risky because if you practice some high intensity activities, you may have a heart attack, for example. You need to be very careful if you are choosing high intensity exercises. But also, I see the similar things here with the muscle business. In the West, now, this for the strength training, this heavyweight training is becoming very popular. Like you need to lift heavy weight. So doing a lightweight doesn't give you so much benefit, but lifting heavier weight gives you more benefit type of trend is going on. The same with the cardio exercise. The high intensity training are more popular, such as Norwegian 4x4. You know Norwegian 4x4?
No.
It is, so you do the 4 minutes of high intensity activities such as sprinting, like you're in the zone 4, zone 5 level, and then you rest for, I think 4 minutes or 3 minutes. I forgot. But anyway, you rest for the similar length of period, and then you do that 4 sets. Yeah. So it's a lot higher intensity than IWT. And then it is considered to be more effective. Yeah. But the caveat is here. Okay, more effective, but do we need that is a question. Because lower intensity interval training gives you a lot of benefit too. And it has a low risk. But high intensity can maybe give you more benefit, but has a higher risk for older individual. So, but the other thing about biohacking movement in the West, especially among some of the YouTubers who are, ex-athletes or bodybuilders, people like that, they kind of bring a fitness mentality, kind of muscular sort of a culture, kind of competitive nature of sort of flexing, muscle type of idea that you want to be better than others. You want to win in competitions and then some of them are taking part in like, marathon races or endurance races and so on. So you have this kind of a competitive aspect in their information giving.
Yeah.
But those are not relevant to the older individual who are just who want to stay healthy into old age. It's a different kind of story. So you don't want to be swayed by this typical fitness sort of mentality of always wanting to do more, want to optimize, to find the most efficient exercise method and so on. it doesn't make that much difference. And less efficient method still works for you. And maybe they are easier for you to practice. That means it is more sustainable and doable, and you can practice for longer duration. That in the end result, you are better off than choosing something that is very difficult and can be dangerous, and then you give up after doing for 2 months.
Right.
Is my opinion.
Great. Interesting. Very good. So can we talk about spirituality in Ikigai and Ikigai Biohacking spirituality? So you said that there's a balance between science and spirituality, that there's an importance in that balance.
Right.
Can you give us an example or examples of how that integration is expressed in Ikigai Biohacking?
Yes. So, yeah, this is interesting because that all comes back, begin from the time in Brighton. So I was exposed to this holistic way of thinking, and spirituality was part of it. So I don't personally, I'm not a very spiritual kind of person. I mean, I don't heavily believe in spirituality. I like the balance. So I also like to be grounded. So that's why I value science too. But I'm open to the possibility of spirituality. And so when you think about longevity and sort of lifespan extension, like if you're thinking of living to 130 or 140, what happens to your life after death? Like, I don't know whether you believe in life after death. I mean, I don't know if I believe in it either, but I also know that I don't deny the existence completely either. So I just don't know. So the fact that I don't know means there is a possibility that there's a life after death. So if there's a life after death, then what happens if you control your lifespan using technology? What happens to your kind of spiritual goal or purposes? Because we are here for a reason. Maybe we are born to learn something, and then we have an infant period, we have childhood, adolescent, and then early adulthood, middle ages, old age. They all provide unique experiences of the period. So even aging is a great learning opportunity. By decaying, we learn that's how nature works. Like everything eventually decays and then come to an end. So senior years is the perfect time to experience that. Even feel weak. We feel weaker than younger people, which is quite depressing. But even that gives certain wisdom. So for me, it is important to stay healthy, but we don't want to miss that experience either. So I don't want to stop aging process, but more like embrace aging process with a kind of positive way. So that is one thing. That is the reason why Ikigai Biohacking doesn't stress lifespan extension, but more health span extension, because people will die eventually, and we are happy to die at some point and then move to the next form of existence, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that kind of the way you framed that, actually, as kind of the arc of the lifetime,
right,
and how in old age there are certain qualities which are also hugely important to the wholeness, the holistic wholeness of life.
right.
And in a way, it makes me think back to the microbiome, and there's so much about that is about breaking down things. It's not just building up, but it's also breaking down, and things can transmute and transform so they can become useful in other ways and part of the life process.
Right.
So I think you've expressed that really beautifully, and it makes me appreciate being older. I think there's something about like vulnerability in old age. Like you maybe have the opportunity to let go of some of the kind of identities and the fixed natures of I'm this or I'm that, and you're more able to embrace the whole. There's an opportunity to embrace the whole. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And maybe just before we close, let's talk a little bit about sustainability. Is that important? The concept of sustainability, or we're talking about regenerative practices these days a lot in farming and lifestyle and health, even regenerative well-being. Is that important in Ikigai biohacking?
Yes, it is. It is very important. So I say that we value personal health and planetary health. So in order for us to be healthy, the planet needs to be healthy because otherwise, if the earth collapses, then no one can survive. Even if we use the latest technology, the best diet, best, supplement, exercise, no one can survive if the weather changes constantly, if the land cannot produce any food. How do we get all those nutrients if we cannot grow food? So I think creating a healthy planet is as critical as regular biohacking measures. So how to do it? So we do have a plenty of knowledge and wisdom already for the regenerative agriculture and forest agroforestry and so many other things to create a biodiversity in land. So we basically promote all those. And the difference from regular biohacking is, well, some people may be open to those things in regular biohacking too. It's not something stressed. So regular biohacking focusing on just personal health. So as long as you optimize your health, the sustainability doesn't matter so much. Good example is organic food. So people are comparing scientific research on the effect of the organic food. Does it have any benefit over regular produce? And then there are actually different studies. Some say yes, it does. Others say no. But it doesn't really matter. Let's say it doesn't have any more benefit on your body to eat organic product. It does to the soil, and it does to the insect. It does to soil microbiome, everything. So if you look at it holistically, it is important to support organic farming or kind of polycultural farming that creates biodiversity rather than monoculture farming. So whenever we practice diet or exercise or anything within the biohacking field, we pay attention to those aspects. If we can, we try to choose organic product. We try to choose local product because local economy and local farming is also important to remain this biodiversity of our environment. But I'm not saying you can only consume organic vegetable, you can only consume local. I mean, it's okay from time to time to consume other product or product from other countries because you have to these days. So I'm not making a rule, but at least pay attention to that aspect as much as possible.
And I come from a background which is very involved in biodynamic and organic farming. My wife has specialized that for many years, and it's become intuitive to me that biodiversity in food we probably will realize it's more and more important. That even in wheat, if you have a monoculture of wheat, that's one type of wheat. It's one type of each wheat grain is the same as the next,
right,
to make it easy and efficient to produce. But in these new strains that they're developing now, which are more adaptable to climate change and they can respond better to the yields at different times of the years if the seasons change. There's more diversity. There's more genetic diversity built into those strains, and that's a natural thing in the plants. So plants become more resilient when they're more diverse. And in a way, we're saying something similar with people, that it's the diversity of the microbiome, the ability to have a very healthy gut biome with all those diverse interacting beings that that are part of us, and a diverse lifestyle. So we're talking about health and nutrition. We're talking about exercise. It's diversity. It's not just one thing, building muscle. but it's the whole. It's the ability to rest and
Right.
digest,
Right.
to pause, take time out,
Right.
and even to have some pause from eating,
Right.
and then back into breaking the fast.
Yeah.
So intuitively, and maybe the science is yet to catch up,
Right.
but I think that sustainability, it kind of, the deeper concept reflects the same kind of practices of working with the holistic nature of the body
Right.
in a holistic relationship with
Right.
nature and the land. So I think it will be interesting to see how the research develops around those areas over
Right.
time.
Yeah. There are some researchers in Japan who does what we call a planetary health. So she talks about soil microbiome and gut microbiome, how they are related, and how those two are kind of inseparable and they have same system. So diversity is important for the soil and for the gut, and therefore, if you lead such a like a sustainable lifestyle, then you are more connected to. I mean, it's easier to practice for a healthier personal lifestyle within the healthier kind of agricultural system.
And I realize there are also there are difficulties in accessing organic food because the price sometimes is complicated, or growing your own food. There's just one little example of which I've got interested in recently, which is the oats, for example. The oat production in the West mainstream oat production uses glyphosate to kill off the crop in order to get a ripe oat, and that's how it's produced. But that means there's like a glyphosate in the oats. So those things like that things that we might want to take notice of in terms of the gut biome, because we're feeding that into our system sometimes. And there are some problems with glyphosate being in the system.
Right.
But anyway, I think it would be time to pull this to a close. If that's okay.
Okay.
I thank you so much.
No. Thank you. Thank you for doing this interview with me. This is such a great help. It's wonderful. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying connecting us together, being here in Japan after 40 years. And it strikes me, in a way, we met in our 20s in our youth. And here we are in our later, you're saying we're getting old. Yes, we're getting old.
We're getting wiser.
Wiser and older.
More interesting.
More interesting in our 60s, breaking down a little bit. And I think we're breaking down the subject here a little bit together, digesting. And I just wanted to appreciate that lifetime arc and how this is my first time in Japan. We met early on in the UK, and you've been several times with your family since then. And it just strikes me that while we've been on different paths, there's some beautiful interconnections in the work we've been doing.
Right.
And I just wanted to really appreciate everything that you shared today and the depth that you've gone into it and what that brings to us. And I hope that in a way that you will, as you expand your work, one thing I think would be really interesting to bring out is the traditional wisdom. We have these opportunities for translating now Japanese into many other languages. And so I'm thinking like interviews with people who are practicing different things would be interesting, so that people can understand the Japanese ancient martial art techniques. And like I was working with you and your wife around a particular practice of postural integration, where we were bringing the tongue to the palate of the mouth and finding an alignment in the spine, which is part of martial art and health practice. And I've been working with that since, and it is actually quite helpful on an energetic level.
Oh yeah, good.
So, I just want to appreciate that there's so much, and I hope that the exchange between the West and the East can contribute to something for the whole.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you very much for doing this interview, and thank you for coming to Japan. And I've also enjoyed you staying here and exploring the rural area. We did the IWT together, and we did some high intensity interval training together yesterday. So that was very fun too.
And I've just been fed the most amazing meals by Yoshi every day. We have this beautiful breakfast.
I've been feeding natto every single day. Yeah, for breakfast and dinner.
So I feel I should measure my gut enzyme, my gut microbiome at this point. But yes, I just want to, so thank you. Thank you, my dear friend.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And Arigato gozaimashita.
どういたしまして。Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Sachiaki Takamiya, the author of Ikigai Bio-Hacking. If you like this video, please give me your thumb up and subscribe to my channel, and please leave your comment. We have covered so many topics today, from Shizen, Shizenha, gut microbiome, Natto bacteria, the bacterial relay, and also exercises and muscle releasing as opposed to muscle flexing, and spirituality and sustainability. So you can give a comment on specific topic too. And for details of some of the point I was making, I've made some other videos and I put all the links below. And also for details, you can always read my books about the basic philosophy behind Ikigai Biohacking, such as Shizen. You can read Ikigai Biohacking, and the latest information on exercises, fasting, and even dietary protocols, including this bacterial relay I talked about. Please read Live Wiser, Not Smarter. And one of the videos which you might find interesting related to today's interview is this one.